"Get out of the way, old man." The voice was a whip-crack of arrogance, sharp and dismissive. It belonged to a teenager on a high-powered e-scooter, moving too fast down a crowded, historic sidewalk. For 88-year-old Elias Eli Vance, the world didn't so much blur as it tilted violently on its axis. A hard, deliberate shove connected with his shoulder, not enough to break bones, but enough to shatter balance and dignity. He staggered sideways, the crisp paper bag of groceries tearing from his grip. Apples and a loaf of bread tumbled across the cobblestones as he crashed into a stack of overflowing trash cans, the clang of metal echoing the sudden cold fury that ignited in his chest. The teenagers, a pack of 4 on their silent electric steeds, just laughed, a high, cruel sound that cut through the afternoon air. They high-fived as they sped off, disappearing around a corner into a narrow brick alleyway. They thought it was over. They thought they had won. But what they didn't know was that they hadn't just pushed an old man. They had pushed a Navy SEAL. And in 20 minutes, their world was going to be surrounded by the consequences. If you believe that honor and respect are not suggestions, but duties we all owe to those who came before us, type honor in the comments below. Let's show the world that this value is non-negotiable. Elias Vance was a ghost in his own city. He moved through the historic streets of Charleston with a quiet purpose that most people mistook for the slow shuffle of old age. They saw an old man stooped by time with hands that showed the faint tremor of his 88th year. They saw the simple khaki pants and the plain collared shirt. They didn't see the man who had walked out of the jungles of Vietnam with secrets in his soul and the foundational grit of SEAL Team 2 in his bones. His small, immaculately kept apartment overlooked the harbor, where the gray naval ships were a constant, silent reminder of a life lived on the edge of the world. His walls weren't filled with medals and commendations. Those were tucked away in a single wooden footlocker. Instead, his walls held maps. Old nautical charts, topographical maps of places whose names were synonymous with conflict. Each map was a story, each contour line a memory of a brother he'd fought beside, a mission he'd survived. He lived a life of routine now, a self-imposed discipline that was the last echo of his former life. A walk to the market was a patrol. A trip to the library was a reconnaissance mission. He didn't seek conflict. In fact, he had spent the last 50 years meticulously avoiding it. He'd had enough noise, enough violence to last a dozen lifetimes. All he wanted was the quiet hum of a peaceful city and the simple dignity of being left alone. Today, that peace was shattered by the buzz of electric motors. The group of teenagers were a familiar nuisance. They treated the historic district like their personal playground, weaving their expensive e-scooters through tourists and locals alike. Their entitlement, a tangible force field. Eli had seen their type before, though in different uniforms and different countries. Arrogance was a universal language. He usually gave them a wide berth, not from fear, but from a profound weariness. Today, they were a swarm blocking the entrance to the market, their laughter loud and abrasive. As Eli approached, their leader, a tall kid named Trent, with a designer hoodie and the kind of sneer that is practiced in a mirror, zoomed his scooter forward, cutting Eli off. He skidded to a stop inches from a mother pulling her young child out of the way. The child cried out in fear. Eli stopped. The weariness in his soul was suddenly replaced by a cold, familiar stillness. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move aggressively. He simply reached out and placed his hand flat on the scooter's handlebar, stopping its forward momentum completely. "Watch where you're going, son," Eli said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a low baritone that seemed to absorb the ambient noise around it. For a split second, the boy, Trent, looked surprised, almost confused, as if the concept of being corrected was entirely foreign. Then the surprise curdled into contempt. He looked at Eli's wrinkled hand on his scooter, then up at his face. "You watch it, Grandpa," Trent sneered, his friends snickering behind him. "Take your hand off my ride." Eli didn't move his hand. He just looked at Trent, his eyes pale blue and clear, holding the boy's gaze. In that gaze was a history the boy could never comprehend. "You almost hit that little girl," Eli stated, not as an accusation but as a fact. "You owe the mother an apology." "Apology?" Trent laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "I don't owe you or anyone anything." He puffed out his chest, a pathetic imitation of dominance. "You think you're tough? You're just a washed-up old fossil." It was then that he made his critical error. He chose to escalate. He chose to turn a moment of correction into an act of violation. "Get out of the way, old man." With those words, he shoved his scooter forward and gave Eli a hard, two-handed push to the shoulder. The push was calculated. It wasn't a wild swing. It was a deliberate act of humiliation. Eli, not expecting the physical assault, lost his footing on the uneven cobblestones. The grocery bag, filled with the simple provisions for his week, ripped open. The world became a kaleidoscope of falling apples, the white paper of a bread loaf, and the hard, unforgiving gray of the trash cans lining the curb. He crashed into them with a deafening clang. Pain flared in his hip, but it was distant, unimportant. What he felt most acutely was the impact of the laughter. The teenagers howled. They pointed. "Look at him! He's swimming in the trash!" One of them shouted. Trent, their leader, felt a surge of triumph. He had asserted his dominance over this relic, this nobody. He had won. He and his friends sped away, their laughter echoing as they turned down a narrow brick alleyway, seeking a place to gloat over their victory. Eli sat there for a moment amid the scattered groceries and the stench of garbage. A kind shopkeeper rushed out to help him, clucking with sympathy. "Are you all right, Mr. Vance?" "Those horrible boys." Eli waved off her concern, his movements stiff but precise. "I'm fine, Martha. Just a little clumsy." He gathered what he could of his groceries, his hands steady, his face an unreadable mask. But his eyes were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a man making a calculation. He knew that alley. It was a dead end, a place where trouble festered. He also knew it was less than a quarter mile from the naval base, where the next generation of his brotherhood was being forged. For Trent, the altercation was over. For Elias Vance, the engagement had just begun. The pain in Eli's hip was a dull throb, a minor inconvenience he had long learned to compartmentalize. Physical pain was temporary. It was the residue of action. But the bitter taste of disrespect, the casual cruelty of the shove, that was a different kind of wound. It was a corrosion of the soul, an insult not to him as a man, but to the very code he had lived by. He stood up, brushing the filth from his trousers, his movements deliberate, methodical. He wasn't angry anymore. Anger was a hot, messy emotion. What he felt now was a cold, clear purpose. It settled over him like a second skin, a feeling he hadn't truly felt since the humid nights in the Mekong Delta. He looked down the alley where the boys had vanished. They thought they had found a sanctuary. Eli knew they had just walked into a classroom. He pulled out a simple, old flip phone. No apps, no internet, just buttons. He didn't need to look up the number. It was one of a handful he had committed to memory. He dialed. After 2 rings, a crisp professional voice answered. "Naval Special Warfare Group, Training Division. I need to speak with Chief Miller," Eli said, his voice quiet but firm. "Who may I say is calling?" "Elias Vance." There was a pause. The name still carried weight in certain circles. It was a name spoken with a kind of reverence, a living link to the very genesis of the SEAL teams. The line clicked. Another voice came on, this one deeper, weathered but sharp with authority. "Eli, is that you? This is Chief Miller. Is everything all right?" Before we continue, it's important to understand why this call was about to unleash such a decisive response. It's not just about a veteran being disrespected. It's about a violation of an unwritten code, a code forged in the deadliest environments on Earth. Eli remembered a time deep in the swampy labyrinth of the Mekong Delta in '68. His 4-man fire team was on a silent patrol when they came across a young Army private, separated from his unit, shaking with fear. The team's point man, a hot-headed kid from Boston, wanted to leave him. "He's not our problem, Eli. He'll slow us down." Eli had overruled him. He saw the terror in the private's eyes and simply placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're with us now, son. Stick close. Do exactly as I say." That simple act of inclusion, of respect, had saved them all. Later that night, it was the young private, positioned as a lookout, whose sharp eyes caught the glint of an NVA helmet in the moonlight, giving the SEALs the crucial seconds they needed to repel a perfectly laid ambush. The hot-headed point man learned a lesson that night. Respect isn't a weakness. It's a force multiplier. Arrogance gets you killed. That was one half of the code. The other half was about the brotherhood. The SEAL teams have a saying, "The only easy day was yesterday." It's a reminder that the standard is always rising, that the commitment is total, but beneath that is a deeper truth. You are never, ever alone. Whether you're active duty, a veteran of 2 years, or a plank owner like Eli, you are part of an unbroken chain. That bond doesn't end when you take off the uniform. It's a blood oath. It means that if a brother is in trouble, you move heaven and earth to get to him. It means that an insult to one is an insult to all. This wasn't something taught in a manual. It was absorbed through shared hardship, through mud and blood and loss. It was the absolute certainty that someone always has your back. Trent and his friends had no concept of this. They lived in a world of temporary alliances and fleeting loyalties. They were about to learn what true commitment looked like. "Gunny," Eli said into the phone using Miller's former rank as a sign of respect. "I'm fine, but there's a situation." He quickly and factually recounted the events, the near miss with the child, the confrontation, the shove, the groceries, the laughter. He used no emotional language. He was a field operator giving a sit rep. He finished with the location. A dead-end alley off of Trad Street, behind the old customs house. 4 of them, on scooters. On the other end of the line, Chief Miller was silent for a long moment. He was standing in the middle of a mock-up of a container ship where his platoon was running close-quarters combat drills. He could hear the pop, pop, pop of simulated fire in the background. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously calm. "Understood, Eli. 4 hostiles, alley behind the customs house. Are you clear of the area?" "I'm clear," Eli said. "Good. We'll handle the debriefing." The line went dead. Chief Miller turned to his men. They were young, powerful, coiled springs of controlled aggression clad in tactical gear. "All right, listen up," he barked. The simulated gunfire stopped. Every eye locked onto him. "Training exercise is suspended. We have a new objective. A real-world scenario has developed. A violation of code. One of our own, a founder, Elias Vance, has been assaulted by a group of punks a few blocks from here." A low murmur went through the platoon. The name Elias Vance was legendary. They had all studied his missions at Bud S. He was a living piece of their history. "We are going to conduct a little community relations seminar," Miller continued, a grim smile touching his lips. "We are going to go over there and have a conversation about respect. No contact, no threats, just education. You will move silent. You will move fast. You will follow my lead. Am I understood?" A chorus of "Hoo-yah, Chief!" was his answer. They moved out, not in a march, but in a tactical formation flowing through the city streets like water. They were ghosts in broad daylight, using alleys and crosswalks with a predatory grace that went unnoticed by the tourists and shoppers. They weren't in uniform, but in their simple black shirts, cargo pants, and boots, they radiated an aura of purpose that was far more intimidating than any dress blues. They were 10 men, moving as one organism, linked by their earpieces and decades of shared ethos. They were the physical embodiment of the unwritten code. This story shows that some bonds can't be broken by time or distance. If you've ever been part of a team, a family, or a brotherhood that you know would drop everything to be there for you, hit that like button. It's a bond worth celebrating. The teenagers' laughter echoed off the brick walls, oblivious. But outside, a different kind of silence was about to deliver a lesson they would never forget. The sound of laughter in the dead-end alley was loud and confident. Trent was regaling his friends with the story of the old man and the trash cans, embellishing every detail. He was the hero of his own pathetic little story. He felt powerful, untouchable. That feeling lasted until a shadow fell over the alley's entrance. It wasn't one shadow, but 2, then 4, then 10. They didn't storm in. They flowed in, a silent, dark tide of men in tactical gear. They moved with an eerie coordination, fanning out, sealing the only exit. They didn't run. They didn't shout. They simply appeared. The laughter died in Trent's throat, replaced by a strangled gasp. The atmosphere in the alley shifted instantly from a teenage hangout to a hunter's trap. Chief Miller walked forward, his men forming a loose, inescapable semicircle behind him. He stopped about 10 feet from Trent, who was frozen, his face a mask of disbelief, turning to raw fear. Miller's posture was relaxed, but his eyes were like chips of ice. He let the silence stretch, letting the weight of their presence press down on the boys. It was a tactic as old as warfare, psychological dominance. "Which one of you is Trent?" Miller asked, his voice calm, conversational. It was somehow more terrifying than a yell. Trent's friends instinctively shuffled away from him, creating a space around him. He was alone. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I am," he stammered. "Good," Miller said, taking one slow step forward. "I'm Chief Miller. These are my associates. We're in the education business. And today, you're our star pupil. We're here to discuss the man you and your friends assaulted about 20 minutes ago. The man you shoved into the garbage. Do you know who he is?" Trent shook his head, mute. "No, you don't," Miller said, nodding slowly. "Because if you did, you'd be on your knees right now, praying to whatever God you believe in that he doesn't decide to hold a grudge. You see him as an old man, a target, a joke. What we see is a living monument. That old man is Elias Vance. He was a Navy SEAL before your parents were born. He fought in jungles so thick the sun never touched the ground. He has saved more lives than you've had hot meals. He has endured more pain in a single morning than you will likely experience in your entire life. The ground you walk on, the freedom you take for granted to ride your expensive toys and disrespect your betters, was paid for by him and men like him. With blood." Miller took another step. The SEALs behind him hadn't moved a muscle, but their collective presence seemed to suck the air out of the alley. "So you didn't just push an old man," Miller continued, his voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. "You spit on his sacrifice. You laughed at his legacy. You desecrated a piece of American history. You did this because you think you're strong. You, with your soft hands and your loud mouth. You think that makes you strong." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Let me tell you what real strength is. Strength is getting on a helicopter at dusk, flying into a place you know is crawling with people who want to kill you, to pull a brother out of the fire. Strength is holding the line when every instinct is screaming at you to run. Strength is living 88 years, seeing the best and worst of humanity, and still having the grace to try and teach a punk kid like you a lesson in common decency before he hurts someone who matters." Trent was visibly trembling now. Tears were welling in his eyes. This wasn't the response he understood. He understood shouting matches with his parents, detention from teachers. He did not understand this cold, surgical dismantling of his entire sense of self. "We're not going to hurt you, Trent," Miller said, and the relief that flashed on Trent's face was immediately extinguished by what came next. "That would be too easy. That would make us like you. No, we're going to give you a choice. An opportunity. You and your friends here are going to go back to the market. You're going to find Mr. Vance's house. His address is 14 Church Street. You're going to buy him a new bag of groceries, everything he dropped, and you're going to deliver it to his door. You're going to stand there, you're going to look him in the eye, and you are going to give him a sincere, heartfelt apology for your conduct. And then, for the next 6 months, every Saturday morning, you're all going to volunteer at the VA hospital. You're going to clean bedpans, read to the blind, and listen to the stories of men whose boots you are not worthy to polish. Am I making myself clear?" Trent could only nod, tears now streaming down his face. His bravado was gone, stripped away, leaving behind the terrified child he was. "Good," Miller said. He straightened up. "Now get out of here. And know this. We have your names. We know where you live. We are always watching. The Brotherhood is everywhere. If we ever hear of you, or anyone like you, disrespecting an elder or a veteran in this city again, we'll have another conversation. It will be much shorter." The boys scrambled, tripping over their scooters and each other in their haste to escape the alley. They didn't look back. Chief Miller watched them go, his expression unreadable. He then turned to his men. "All right, seminar's over. Back to the base." He walked out of the alley and saw Eli standing across the street, watching. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged. No salute was needed. There was just a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It was an acknowledgement of a duty performed, a code honored. It was the silent language of warriors. The story of what happened in that alley became another quiet legend in a city full of them. But the true hero of this story wasn't Chief Miller or even Elias Vance. The hero was the code they both served, the unwritten code. It's a code that says you don't leave people behind. It says that honor isn't a word, but an action. It says that true strength is measured not by how you treat your superiors, but by how you protect the vulnerable. This code isn't exclusive to the Navy SEALs. It is the bedrock of every strong family, every loyal team, every great nation. It is the invisible thread that holds a civilized society together. The teenager's crime wasn't just disrespect. It was a symptom of a world that is forgetting this code, a world where personal convenience often outweighs communal duty. Eli Vance and Chief Miller's platoon didn't just teach 4 boys a lesson, they reminded an entire neighborhood of what that code looks like in action. They reminded us that the defense of our values doesn't always happen on a foreign battlefield. Sometimes it happens on a quiet street corner. Sometimes it begins with one person deciding not to look away. The question this story leaves us with is not what the SEALs did, but what we will do. In our own lives, when we see casual cruelty, when we see the vulnerable being dismissed and the elderly being ignored, will we be the one who walks by, or will we be the one who makes the call? You don't need to be a Navy SEAL to honor the code. You just need to be a good citizen. You just need to remember that we are all, in some way, our brother's keeper. If this story resonates with the code you live by, subscribe to NX Incredible Stories. Let's continue to champion the stories of those who never forgot the meaning of honor, courage, and commitment. Because in a world of noise, these are the truths that must be spoken. Semper Fidelis, always faithful.